Obviously, digital being 60% of lead generation and 60% of the opportunity and growing, might not be your biggest move-in source, but in terms of ROI and lead generation and cost per move-in, it probably is your best bang for your buck, and it continues to be that way. And so we are seeing more investment in that, but I'd be as bold to say we're not seeing enough investment. Offline is not dead. It's just how do you use offline to complement, right, what you're doing digitally and what you're doing online. Right. And that's where the term integrated campaign comes. So we're not talking about integration in terms of systems, even though that's key to be able to deliver that type of experience, right, and engagement with your customers, with prospects. But it's really comes down to, can you really put that together, right? Can you really get that integrated campaign where your offline, your online are complementing each other, same message, same voice, and that's based on trigger, right? Event trigger and time trigger that could be very, very impactful. Trying to, again, like you said, perfectly shorten that sales cycle and that sales funnel.
Well, and I think, some of the other opportunities maybe is how much cheaper is it to run a PPC campaign and test 5 different ad copies than trying to run a TV and radio campaign and do the same thing?
Well, a lot cheaper if you do it right. So,
right.
Exactly. That's the key, and so I would just go back to expertise in the industry, and what I've seen. And I think, that's probably the biggest, I would say, headwind, talking about headwinds, not trying to shift the conversation too quickly there, but I think the biggest headwind is the lack of knowledge and expertise on the digital side in the industry. Now, I know I could kind of say that selfishly and, but honestly, I've been enough providers, organizations, right? Large, medium, and small. And I've been on the aggregator side and also the agency side, where I work with a lot of small providers where they have 1 community or a dozen communities, right? Or 2 dozen communities, where I see that they're really, honestly, very vulnerable and very beholden to, whoever is going to help lead them down that path. And it can be pretty scary, right? So, they're putting a lot of trust in other organizations to really develop their strategy and tactics to try to maximize their opportunity digitally, which can be very scary from what I've seen. Again, I've worked with many other agencies and not naming names, but I've seen some very questionable things from industries, everything from how they report their numbers to the products and services, what they're charging. I would even use the word egregious. But if you don't know what you don't know, then that's what you're going to get. And I think a lot of organizations right now, that's what they're getting because they don't have that in-house expertise, and it doesn't take much. I would, from a business standpoint, from an operations standpoint, if that 60% of your opportunity is coming from online today, and that will continue to grow, and you don't have that dedicated digital resource in-house on your marketing team, not really, it kind of blows my mind that it's that's not, a position at every organization, whether you're, 12 communities, 50 communities, 200 or 1,000 communities. That expertise, you need to have that in-house in today's environment that we're in.
Right. And, I agree. I think that it's really important. I think it's a little bit scary sometimes. We talk to a lot of marketers that are just a single person, and they do just about everything. They wear 5, 6, 7, 8 hats.
That's right.
And they barely have enough time to pick the phone up on the leads that are coming in. How are they going to spend the time to develop an expertise in a new marketing channel? Right. So I think that is not only an opportunity for our communities to get better, but it's also a challenge. How do we find expertise? And again, we don't have to find somebody that can do it all for us, right? We just need somebody there that can be our in-house expert, can help be our industry advisor, and help us navigate the waters, find the right partners, find the right MarTech stack, find all the right solutions, and then just help implement, help oversee. I think that's all very important.
That's right. I would agree, Phil. And if I could just step it back, one step further, I would say, not just saying the number one headwind would be lack of digital marketing expertise, but probably overall marketing expertise in the industry, right? So as you mentioned, we wear a lot of hats, right? So organizations have a lot of sales and marketing people, right? So we'd always kind of bucket that together. Well, sales and marketing are 2 different disciplines and 2 different skill sets, right? In many industries, right? For our industry, and obviously from an operational standpoint, it's great if you can be a sales and marketing director, if you can be a sales and marketing VP, sales and marketing SVP, that really helped, sometimes the bottom line when you're looking at FTEs and you're looking at your balance sheet. But, I think organizations today don't realize the detriment of that type of structure within an organization, within the senior care space today. Again, having dedicated sales folks that are really good at doing their job of selling and closing, and having that dedicated, skill set of marketing, right? And heavy on obviously the digital side, to maximize that 60% opportunity and growing. I think that's probably where the biggest headwind is, I think, for the industry today, is just not having the knowledge and skill set in-house on the provider side. And as you mentioned, it's not just having an army of people. It's really just having the right few key people that are going to still manage maybe a bevy of vendors, but you know how to manage them. You know how to keep them accountable. You know the numbers. There's been so many times where I will walk in the door on the provider side and start working with them and start, asking them, what are the numbers? And it's amazing that they don't know the numbers. If they do know the numbers, they don't know what the numbers mean or if they're good or bad. And most of the time the numbers are bad, whether they know it or not. It starts that education process. But, I kind of say that lightly, but, that's the bottom line, right? That's where your opportunity is. That's where your biggest return on investment is. So it's not a joke. It's very serious. And, when I walk into an organization, I see that level of opportunity. It makes me drool a little bit because it's like low-hanging fruit. The bar's set pretty low. So again, back to that opportunity piece, but it's a little scary. Again, the lack of knowledge and expertise, and not knowing, the opportunity they have right before their eyes. A lot of times it's just, we need to buy more leads. We need to close more leads. Well, sure, absolutely. But the answer is not always buy more leads, because it's not always relative that if you buy more leads, you'll close more leads, right? Chances are you probably have plenty of leads. You probably don't need more leads, so you can learn how to efficiently work the leads you currently have, as well as start closing at a higher rate, right? Looking at your lead gen pipeline on the marketing side, then look at the sales closing side of things as well, right? Operationally, are you very efficient on both ends of those spectrums? Usually.
Right. And, this is an interesting question that just popped in my mind. Being back on the provider side, what is the best way to educate our industry? How do we increase the overall level of knowledge, not just, for a select few or for the larger providers, but, for every marketer, at a single site community wearing 2 or 3 hats?
Sure, absolutely, Phil. I mean, that's a great question. It's one that I've struggled with over the years. As much as I've been sort of, digital marketer, I've sort of been the, digital educator in chief, if you will, at every organization I've been at, primarily because there's that lack of knowledge and expertise. And it's tough to, always be doing your day job, wearing all the hats you're doing, and making sure that you're educating not only maybe your boss at a VP level or an SVP level, but all the way up to C-suite. Do they really understand, the value of, what you're bringing to the table and the opportunity that they have before them on the digital marketing and just overall the marketing side. And I've been pretty successful with doing that. It takes time, that education process. I think once they start seeing that opportunity, their eyes light up and wow, this is pretty amazing stuff, which is really cool. But, again, if you don't have that dedicated in-house resource, then you're relying on vendors to educate you. And they're not always so transparent. There's some great vendors, great agencies out there. As many as there are good ones, there's bad ones too. They're not educating and they're taking advantage of the lack of expertise in-house. We need to watch that. But I would say, then how do we do it for organizations at large? I think it's really conferences, whether that's Argenum or whether that's Leading Age or Smash that's in Chicago every year, that's primarily dedicated on marketing and a big contingent on that on digital marketing. We need to get folks there. We need to get folks from the community level all the way to C-level suite to come to these conferences to really learn, right, about strategies and tactics. So just so they can understand the impact and the opportunity, right? Not to get nuanced and not to really get to the point where they're going to be the ones, obviously, running the strategy and tactics, but knowing that they need that in-house person, knowing that they need that accountability, that they need to find the right vendors, right? Knowing that it's huge and can be detrimental to their business and their organization if they don't have those skill sets and resources that they really
Right.
need to achieve success in a very competitive market.
Right. Right. Yeah, I agree. And I keep hearing online and from thought leaders like yourself on how competitive the market is getting. I believe in Q2 in 2017, it was the lowest occupancy rates we had seen in 10 plus years. And as you said, there's a lot of opportunity for the development side of things, but what that does is create challenges on the marketing side. If you've got a community that's been around for 50 years, great, you've got a legacy, but you probably also have a legacy building. And there's 2 or 3 brand new buildings that just went up. How do we get past, how do we continue to connect on that care level instead of on, a saltwater swimming pool or whatever it may be from an amenity side. But Jason, besides the, kind of the lack of experience and a little bit of understanding on that marketing and digital marketing side, what are some other headwinds that you see for our senior living sales and marketers 2018?
Yeah, I think, we talked about lack of experience on the digital and just primarily the marketing side. So I know I keep going back to digital because that's my world, but I would say my world is also just marketing. And honestly, if you're running true integrated marketing campaigns, then it's not just digital anymore. It's truly, marketing as a whole, right? Online and offline should be right at the hip. It's really good marketing. But I would say sales. I think, there's a lot of expertise on the sales side from the community level all the way up to C-suite, which is great, but it's also a challenge because I've worked again on the provider side where I see a lot of long-term experience on sales, but that can be a challenge because we're doing a lot of things that we used to do 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I've seen organizations double and triple down on sales tactics, and honestly, I think the data shows clearly that it just doesn't work, it doesn't resonate anymore. The market has changed. It's not just the internet, the internet's a big piece of that, but also look at, professional referrals, which, are gold. We all want more professional referrals. They close at a much higher rate. But, can we close them at that rate that we used to close them at? Do we have those relationships? Is it as easy to get those relationships and cultivate those relationships? And I would say no. You ask a sales and marketing director, a VP of regional sales and marketing, will tell you, those doors are starting to close. It's harder to have those conversations and those meetings and those relationships. Not that we still can be trying it, but maybe in a different way. Maybe we could be looking at, where are our sales folks spending their time? Are they truly sales folks? Are they marketing or business development folks, right? Where should their focus be? And I believe their focus should be more on selling, relationship building with the prospect and closing. But then in order to do that, you need additional resources, right? So where you could still have business development out in the community, right? Where you have folks out there building those professional relationships, still trying to get that piece of the business, but that is becoming more competitive, right? So, and again, just looking at a lot of organizations I've been with where they really haven't changed a lot of their sales strategies and tactics, where, just for instance, they'll have their sales and marketing director at the community level spend anywhere from 60, 70, sometimes 80% of their time outside of the building, which just blows my mind because if 60% of your opportunity is coming in via phone and email to that marketing associate's desk, and they're outside the building 60, 70, 80% of the time, that's a little scary, right? I really don't think there's the opportunity there once was outside the building, right, with those relationships. Not that there's not opportunity, there is, again, but I think you're better served having that marketing sales director be in-house, making sure that they're on the phone, that they're talking with prospects, they're meeting with prospects, giving tours. I mean, the last thing you want in this day and age is, to rely on your manager of duty or someone else to be able to take a walk in and get them on a tour. It's going to be, that conversion rate is going to be much lower than having your sales folks, right, that are very good at what they do, conducting that tour and that relationship and that ongoing conversation to help close that opportunity, right, with that prospect. So I just think, sales needs to mature a little bit in the industry. I think, that's a bit of a headwind that we kind of look at tactics again that we, 5 years ago wasn't that long ago, but a lot has changed in 5 years. Then, 10 years ago and 20 years ago. And again, I've been in meetings recently where I've heard folks, when I say recently over the last 2-3 years, where I've heard sales folks literally just, well, we're going to double and triple down on that because that used to work and we're going to make it work again. It's like, well, maybe there's a reason why it's not working anymore. Maybe you need to look outside the box, and I know that's a little scary. It's tough to try new things. We throw around the word innovation and strategy and all these things, these buzzwords, right, on the marketing and sales side in the industry. But, are we truly looking at real strategy? Truly looking at real innovation? Are we doing things differently? Or are we just staying within our comfort zone and, calling it something else or changing up something, slightly to make ourselves believe that we have a new strategy and that we're innovative? And that's really not the case. And again, that's all the way from, I think, the community level all the way through up organizations. A lot of times it's in the VP to C-suite level. And I know change is hard. And again, if you don't have the data, if you don't have the expertise and the skill set, and it is tough to change. It's tough to have trust in change, especially when your job is on the line, right? And it's your job to move the needle. It's your job to increase occupancy, right? And, if you don't have the data and you don't have the capabilities, then it's hard to have the trust in making change, right? Of course, you want to look at, well, this is what I did 5 years ago and 10 years ago, either in my current role or another role, another provider. Well, I'm going to do that again because I'm going to make that work. And I know that's proven because I've done that before. But that's not always the case as the market continues to change and get more competitive, which
Right. And I think it goes back to, if it's still working, the data should show you that it's still working. Same with any marketing channel. Those are things that, again, in my personal opinion, we need to track all the time, weekly, monthly. We need to be reviewing. If you are doing more grassroots and trying to reach out, how often are they sending you referrals? Is it once a month, twice a year? How often is it? Is it really producing the results? And then adjust, like you said. But without the data, you're kind of flying blind, and you could fly yourself in the wrong direction.
That's right. And I think we see that a lot at the provider level. It's just flying blind, knee-jerk reaction. Just we think it's that, we think it's this, and not really looking at the data. And it's not always that, a strategy used 5 years ago or 10 years ago won't work today. Right. That's not it at all. But right. Is it truly working? What's the reason behind it working or not working, right? Get to that. Get to the bottom line. Is it because it's harder to get those relationships? It's harder to get those meetings and get in front of discharge planners and care planners at hospitals because maybe they're using, Caring.com or Place for Mom as their source, or maybe they're a healthcare group and they're going to another source, or, whatever that may be. Or it might be, no, those relationships, whatever market you're in, are still viable. It's a great source, but you just don't have the right person, right? That's able to really, make those connections and develop those relationships. So it might be a personnel or associate issue or a resource issue too. So it's not just, well, that's an old tactic, it's all digital, we got to go here. It's not that at all. It's just, again, going back to the data. What does the data say? Why does the data say that? Right? Let's really figure out what the data is saying and why. And let's commit to, okay, we're going to make change. We're going to, change things up, right? We're going to optimize where we can optimize. We're going to make change where we can make change. It might be uncomfortable, but just, we have to have some faith because we need to try something new. We can't always just keep going back to the go-tos that used to work yesterday.
Well, and I totally agree, Jason. I think that's a great point. Talking about something new, not that this is necessarily new, but I think it's really starting to become it's becoming a service line that a lot of providers are expanding into, which is home health care. How do you see, and again, that's not necessarily a new service, but it is something for a lot of communities that they're just bringing on. They're just starting to offer that. How do you see home health care impacting this industry? Is it an opportunity for communities? Is it a challenge? Where does that fit into how we care for our seniors and how our seniors retire?
Sure. Great question, Phil. I think it's a huge opportunity. It's a huge opportunity, but yet it's a scary opportunity for providers, I think, because I think it will reshape the industry. It's already starting to reshape the industry, how we look at care, how residents, how prospects want to receive care and where they want to receive care, how they want to age in place, what they perceive as being a community. I think, today's resident 80 plus, I think that market's a little different, obviously, than maybe baby boomers, right? The adult children that are going to start looking at care differently, that already are looking at care differently, that, want to age in place and be in their home. So I think, long term for the industry, for bricks and mortar, for, your AL primarily, maybe obviously, independent AL, Even a CCRC can be maybe a little scary, when you start looking at the effects of home health care and what that can potentially do and potential impact on the business at large. Obviously, always be a market share. And obviously things like memory care, obviously we need secure facilities. We need that higher level of care and acuity for those individuals, as well as skilled nursing for individuals, as opposed to what you're going to receive obviously in your home. But we all know too that, the level of care in home is only going to increase as well, right? So, that's going to continue to go that way. But I think in the short term, there's a huge opportunity for the assisted living, independent living and CCRCs and other providers or providers of those care types in the industry to really embrace home health care, right? Use that as a feeder, as a marketing feeder. We shouldn't push back on that. We should, and obviously there's a lot of providers out there like the Brookdales of the world that, are obviously developing, right, and investing in home health care and want that full continuum, to be able to provide that type of care, but also to be able to connect and integrate that care with their other care types as well. And not every provider obviously can make that investment and build that full continuum. But I think it's embracing that continuum, right? Embracing and meeting people where they're at, right, with their care needs. And building that relationship through home health care and doing those home visits and monitoring, maybe someone wants to be at home and they can be at home for a year or 2 years, but at some point, right, the acuity level needs are going to be higher and they're going to need assisted living and or memory care. So, who's going to be top of mind, right, when they're doing that search and they need to find the right fit for their loved one? Well, if you're already there, right, and already have that relationship built, chances are you're going to be able to, develop that relationship further and bring them into your community. So I think there's a huge opportunity on the marketing side to build those relationships with home care. I know the industry is actively doing that. I think we could do that more. But long term, I think it could be potentially could shake up the industry in terms of how we look at community and what that means. And I think it's not a big surprise. I think a lot of organizations are talking about that and looking at that and trying to pontificate of what that looks like. But I think home health care has a big component with what future community looks like.
Yep, I agree. And I think part of that, where if you can provide that care at home, the biggest thing I think any marketer that I've talked to would say is senior living, senior care is about trust. That's really what it boils down to is do I trust that you as the provider are going to take care of either myself, my loved one, my parent. Do I really feel that way? And if you're already taking care of them and you have for the past 2 or 3 years, it's a pretty smooth transition. And I couldn't agree more. But I also think that in the long term, I think that we will see it start to challenge brick and mortar. I agree. I think that, again, we know that seniors today are actively aging in place much longer. They're waiting until they have a much higher acuity to get in. And I think CCRCs are seeing that struggle. They're seeing their average age balloon over 80, 82, 84. And they're struggling to find that kind of in between there on the baby boomers and our current, seniors. So
that's right. It is a struggle on the CCRC side already with, can you really have that full continuum of care? Can you balance that continuum of care because of the higher acuity resident that you're coming into your community? So it's a really tough balance right now, I think, for a lot of CCRCs. And, going back to what you're saying about that relationship piece it's huge. From a marketing standpoint, it's not just shiny and new and, saltwater pools and, all those wonderful things. I mean, we all know that on the provider side, we've all had new development. We all know how tough those new developments are to fill, right? And get, achieve occupancy goals, because you can only get so many residents, so many families excited about shiny and new. It really comes down to care and relationships. We always, you can have a new development across the street that's, got all the bells and whistles, and they might only be at 60, 70% occupancy, struggling for 2-3 years. And, another community, their competitors across the street that's been there 20 years and they're at 88, 90% occupancy or plus. And it really comes down to the care, right? It's the reputation and care. And we all know it's a very emotional decision. There's a lot of emotions that come with that, as we know. And so we want to make sure that we really feel good about, where our loved ones at, where mom and dad's at, are they being taken care of? Are they in the best environment? Not just necessarily do they have the latest and greatest, features at that community, right? Really important, especially for that 80+ crowd right now, knowing that, they don't care if, you have the nicest furnishings and leather and an Olympic pool and all these great things. I mean, that's not really where their comfort is, right? Or where their needs are really. I know, that resonates pretty well with some baby boomers, the adult child, but at the end of the day, I can't tell you how many times I've been in communities where there's been competitive pressure, but, we're in a building that's 20+ years old and, we have 80, 90, 92% occupancy, and it really comes back to the care. You start talking to the families, what is our edge? Why are we doing as well as we're doing? Obviously, we need to continue keeping that up, but what is that secret sauce, if you will, from a marketing standpoint? It really comes back to relationship building, right? Are you empathetic? Are you building that level of trust, that connection over time? It takes a lot of work, but it's very powerful, right? And it's very meaningful. It's very meaningful to the families.
Right. And I'm sure you've seen, a lot of great communities that can translate the relationship you have inside the community onto their digital presence, right? And how do you really best illustrate that that's the care you'll receive and the depth of commitment and the relationship. And so that being said, Jason, you've been very generous with your time. We really appreciate the amazing perspectives we have that you shared with us today. So would you like to share any parting thoughts or maybe let folks know how they can get a hold of you if they have any additional questions?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Jeff, Phil, I just really appreciate the opportunity. It's been, fantastic. And, I love, to take advantage of opportunities like this for anything to try to, educate and lend my 2 cents for whatever that's worth. But, I definitely appreciate the opportunity. If anybody wants to get in touch with me in the future, but, my email address is usually best. J McCloud, I'll spell that. It's JMCCLOUD @benchmarkquality.com. And, I love having continued conversations with thought leaders and others in the industry. It's how I learn. That's how I can help educate organizations as well too. So I think is the much we can do to partner in that communication, from the sales and marketing standpoint, at least in my world, I think the better organizations can be. So I appreciate the opportunity.